So here goes nothing. One of the things I missed last time was the illustrations. Well, there was one illustration that I didn't show. There's only one so far, so I'll just show you that. Actually, my bad. There's actually a few. Sorry. Whoops. There's actually 2 or 3. There's one more, I think. I think I showed this one. Oh, sorry. No, my bad. So, that's the last one that I missed. Hopefully you can see that. Okay, so this is where I'm going to start. So this is chapter 1. So before I read the preface. So chapter 1 is titled Amazing Feats and Deep Connections. Betty, a New Caledonian crow, peers briefly into a tall, clear, vertical tube at the small basket of food inside it, and pecks quickly at the plastic to test if she can break through it. Her brain is lit with electrical and chemical energy as she contemplates the puzzle of reaching the treats. Drawing on her experience in the wild, using stems and branches, she grasps in her beak one end of a straight length of wire that researchers have left nearby, and plunges the business end down into the tube in an unsuccessful attempt to spear the food. When that doesn't work, she tries to edge the food up and out by pressing the wire against the walls of the tube. After that doesn't work, Betty next fiddles with her wire and bends it, turning it from a spear into a nicely serviceable hook. With this manufactured tool in her beak, she deftly fishes the handle of the basket and lifts the prize from the cylinder, just as a person might heft a bucket full of water from the bottom of a well. Betty's fabrication of a fishing tool would easily best the efforts of other creatures that are widely considered to be her mental superiors. A dog, even a pooch of the cleverest breed, would probably pour the tube, shake it, chew at the top, and dig at the base, and yet most likely fail to get any reward for its efforts. A human toddler might also rap on the container or try to muscle it over, and eventually cry in frustration or pound the carpet with hands and feet. A concerned parent or older sibling might respond to the toddler's tantrum, reinforcing the child's inadvertent use of his social power and connections to acquire the prize, and also perhaps reinforcing a learned helplessness or dependency. For this particular test, the crow was smarter than a dog or a human toddler. But if we measured the ability of dogs, crows, and toddlers to learn voice commands, the dog would rule the day. Demonstrating mental prowess or the intelligence of a species requires a wide range of tests and knowledge of the animal's ecology and physical ability. Dog dogs may fetch newspapers and retrieve ducks for hunters, but without opposable thumbs, they can't hold wire tools. Sorry, I reread that because you may not have heard that properly. Wild New Caledonian crows, on the other hand, regularly use their beaks to fashion hook tools from plant materials. This ingenuity, crafting a hook from a foreign material and using it to gain an unreachable reward in a new setting, requires thinking, appraisal, and planning, mental attributes that have rarely been associated with birds until recently. Most people consider birds to be instinctual automatons, acting out behaviours long ago scripted in their genes. But Gifts of the Crow celebrates the fact that some birds, particularly those in the corvid family, which we will generally call crows, are anything but mindless or robotic. These animals are exceptionally smart. Not only do they make tools, but they understand cause and effect. They use their wisdom to infer, discriminate, test, learn, remember, foresee, warn of impending doom, recognize people, seek revenge, lure or stampede other birds to their death. They quaff coffee and beer, turn on lights to stay warm or expose danger, speak, steal, deceive, gift, windsurf, play with cats and team up to satisfy their appetite for diverse foods, whether soft cheese from a can or a meal of dead seal. You can think of these birds as having mental toolkits on par with our closest relatives, the monkeys and apes. Like humans, they possess complex cognitive abilities. In fact, they have also been called feathered apes. Some of the crow's achievements we discuss are well documented by credible observers. Most are plausible, albeit astonishing. And because these birds often live near people, in our gardens, parks, and cities, they often involve humans in their daring, calculated, emotional, and bizarre activities. Keenly aware of our habits and peculiarities, they quickly learn to recognize and approach those who care for or feed them, and to avoid and even scold people who threaten or harm them. The important skill was learned and honed over millennia, and enables crows to exploit friendly people and other animals and avoid the dangerous. These birds are noteworthy in their ability to thrive in the midst of environmental challenges that discourage and even extinguish other species. The few exceptions are species that are isolated on islands, the Hawaiian crow and Mariana crow, for instance, which are among the most endangered species on the planet. Other island crows, the majority of which are specialized members of diverse tropical forest ecosystems, have also become rare. The Bengal crow of Indonesia, the Banggai crow, the Banggai crow of Indonesia, for instance, was even thought extinct until glimpsed in 2007 on Small Pelling Island by intrepid local biologists. The success of most crows has a lot to do with their flexible and complex social lifestyles, long lifespans and large brains, which are able to integrate and shape what they sense into reasoned action. In fact, corvids and our own species share qualities which have enabled both of us to adapt to changing environments and to flourish. The sophisticated behavior of crows overturns any lingering notions of a bird brain as being unintelligent criminologists have documented and explored Corvid's language, delinquencies, insight, frolic, passion, wrath, risk-taking, and awareness. In Gifts of the Crow, we explore each of these topics to learn how crows' individual and collective social learning abilities enable them to craft tools, communicate subtle messages, plan for the future, intuit solutions, deceive others, and carefully adjust their boisterous lives to our unpredictable human nature. Science is far from understanding the ways of our own brains, let alone of birds. Sorry, I misread that. Let me try that again. Science is far from understanding the ways our own brains, let alone of birds, produce complicated behaviours. But in the last 2 decades, our understanding of how a bird's cerebral equipment is organised and how bits and pieces of it function has made enormous strides. Now we gain new insights every day. The complexity of a bird's brain becomes evident when we examine its many parts, which we do throughout Gifts of the Crow in Tony's original illustrations. Even phrenologists from the 19th century were enamoured with bumps and dents in the crow skull, to which they attributed centres for caution, destructiveness, musicality, and imitation. The crow's brain is indeed packed with ability, but our modern scientific view looks deep within the brain. There, relays from the eyes, ears, mouth, and skin transport their view of the world to the brainstem and into the brain, which uses emotion to integrate and shape diverse information and past experience to guide the crow's behaviour and enhance its survival and reproduction. Its brain allows the bird to learn quickly, to accurately associate rewards and dangers with environmental cues, and to then combine what it knows with what it senses, and to draw conclusions, leading to a more informed response. Consider our drawing of the crow's brain activity centres, which shows capability that we humans once thought were unique to us. It's just got a bit of a diagram. I'm not sure if that's in focus. Another one. The complexity of the bird's brain is evident when one considers some of the many interconnected and integrated functions performed in its various regions. Information from the outside world enters the brain through the brainstem, hindbrain and midbrain. These regions are critical to maintaining basic biological functions, but also exert considerable influence over other parts of the brain when synthesizing and releasing a variety of chemicals, including hormones, opioids, and dopamine. The forebrain of a crow assesses sensory information, integrates this view of the environment with context and emotion to form memories, and sends electrical and chemical instructions to motor control regions to command action. The phrenological bust is an early view of the crow's brain from 1836, so that was the last image I showed you. Rather than distinct actions suggested by this image, modern views of the crow's brain emphasize pigeons interact to affect behaviour. In exploring the neurobiology of crows, we tell a lot of stories that show that humans and crows have an ongoing connection, a cultural coevolution that has shaped both our species for millions of years. Archaeological evidence reveals that our earliest human ancestors shared the company of ravens and crows. Early hunter-gatherers noticed these birds and celebrated them in legends and myths around the world over thousands of years. Ancient spiritual connections are evident on the cave walls of Lascaux, France, where a crow-headed man has been interpreted as the soul of the fallen hunter. The writings of early Scandinavians celebrated ravens as useful informants. The first people of the Pacific Northwest saw them as creators and motivational forces. While in the oral histories of the Eskimos, the abilities of ravens to prevail in lean times led these people to tie a raven's foot around the neck of each newborn child to assure the survival of the next generation. The Haida people of the Pacific Northwest placed their deceased shamans on elevated altars adorned with carved ravens, which symbolized the priest's connection with the Creator. There, their bodies would be eaten by ravens, which would free their spirits and allow them to travel. In Tibet, in a similar tradition, I think someone just turned on a light. My bad. In Tibet, in a similar tradition, dead loved ones' bodies were cut up and placed on tower platforms where revered ravens and vultures could eat them. Throughout the world, the mysterious, ingenious, and sometimes horrifying ways of crows and ravens have dramatically influenced our language, music, art, religion, and popular culture. A melancholy Edgar Allan Poe was moved to poetic fame by a talking raven. Corford's mysterious dark form appears in Alfred Hitchcock's film The Birds, and Vincent van Gogh's final painting, Wheatfield with Crows, in 1890. And of course, contemporary film continues to employ the crow as a metaphor for the unknown. From our interface with Corford culture, the English language includes words like crow's nest, crowbar, crow's feet, rave, and ravenous, among many other terms inspired by Corford's. Names on the land, more than 400 in Britain alone, from high and lonely places like Corby's Crag, to those commemorating past transgression and execution like Ravenstone, reveal the species' influence on our sense of place, even our most personal adornments, clans and family names, like Bertram. Wise Raven is the meaning of Bertram. Crawford, which means crowfoot. Ingram, the Norse god of Ing's raven. And Corbin, Little Crow, commemorate Corfords. The bold demeanour of these common birds is reflected in mascots chosen for sports teams, e.g. the Baltimore Ravens or the Adelaide Crows, and names of rock bands, e.g. the Counting Crows and Black Crows. Repulsion at the sight of Corford scavenging human corpses produced public outcries to rid London. 1,000 of ravens after the fire of 1666. It shaped the masks worn by doctors during the plague, and likely fostered taboos and colloquial sayings about eating crow, continuing what is likely a relatively recent ritual. The British Crown ensures that there are always 6 ravens in residence at the Tower of London, where a royal keeper of the ravens tends to the 6 birds, plus reserves, whose tenure is said to prevent the fall of the empire. I find old traditions like that funny. And then it's got a picture here that says, place names often reflect our association with corvids. Crow's Landing is in California. As people were influenced by corvids, so too did people influence the birds. Our ancestors probably first encountered these abundant, bold, and wily scavengers where they fed together. Messy places like animal kills, butchering rocks, and fish clearing sites, where the species still meet today. Over time, the birds learned to exploit the agricultural resources our ancestors produced and the food supplies that we dried or stored. Crows scavenge what we provide, expand their ranges to colonize our cities, and track our farming practices. They adjust daily travels and migratory traditions to both avoid and exploit us as necessary. The supplements we provide, food, water, shelter, and safety, have increased the abundance, survival, and birth rates of many crows. We human beings and our activities afford corvids numerous opportunities to innovate. They harvest tenderized, accessible roadkill, and even place hard seeds on the road, so our cars will crush the shells and make the kernels or nut meals available. So there are a lot of videos of that very thing. Fascinating to watch. Happens in Japan, I think, quite a bit in in a lot of their major cities, because they're so densely populated that crows have found all these adaptations to crack, various nuts and things. And they actually wait. They wait to hear the sound of the little go, the cross. So, when you get the little man on the display that says, you can cross the road now. They wait to hear that sound, and then they swoop down and pick it up because they know that cars can't cross. They use our garbage as food and nesting material. They incorporate our voices into their language. They compete mightily with us and routinely irritate us. I've got some stories there as well. This is how I became fascinated, but I'll get to that later. The reason why I became fascinated with them. But our attempts to dissuade them have favoured the warier, more secretive birds, as have diseases we introduce that challenge their immune systems and weed the weakest from the flock. Some people won't even consider that the 8 traits that we examined, language, delinquency, insight, frolic, passion, wrath, risk-taking, and awareness, can be characteristic of non-human species. But the science of bird intelligence and cognition has interesting, real stories that should compel a full examination of such an inflexible, antiquated view of humans as the centre of the natural world. By observing nature, we can bring a sharper focus to the picture of ourselves and how we fit into the system of life. Watching corvids in particular reveals some of the complexities involved in survival and the strategies other species employ to make their way in the world. We've found that when we reflect over what goes on in the lives of these birds, they give us ideas, insights, aesthetic inspiration, perhaps equally important, fresh considerations for our imagination. We are hardly the first generation to benefit from watching the behaviour of members of the corvid family. The author Charles Dickens, writing during the golden age of natural history in England, kept ravens as pets and was so inspired by their behaviour that he included a raven as a principal character in one of his early novels, Barnaby Rudge. He named the raven character Grip, after a pet bird that he had taught to say, "Keep up your spirit, never say die," and "Polly put the kettle on, we'll have tea, or we'll all have tea." Dickens' description of Grip suggests that he understood animal behaviour and employed his knowledge pointedly. The raven becomes the alter ego of the simple-minded Barnaby Rudge, who announces, "He's my brother, Grip. He's always with me, always talking, always merry." Before I go on, there's a picture. So Charles Dickens consults his raven Grip. I apologise if none of this is in focus when I show images. I'm not sure. So I can't view the video, unfortunately, with my setup, so apologies. Grip is referred to as a knowing imp, and sharpest and cunningest of all the sharp and cunning ones. Time and again the raven advances the plot or reveals information when the human characters are unable to do so. It sounds like an interesting concept. That reminds me of the movie Crow. That's where they got the inspiration for that, for sure. That's interesting. Yeah, it's an old movie, actually. It might be telling my age there. But yeah, Crow was, I think it was made in 1994. The inspiration of Grip the Raven continued after Barnaby Rudge was published. Appearing in America in 1840, the novel was reviewed favourably in Graham's Ladies and Gentlemen's Magazine by a critic from Philadelphia named Edgar Allan Poe. While he admired Dickens' novel, he wrote that the character Grip the Raven could have been employed even more successfully had the author given the bird a greater prophetic presence. 4 years later, Poe composed his famous poem, The Raven. It clearly echoes a scene in Chapter 5 of Barnaby Rudge, where inside an English country inn on a dark night, an acquaintance of Barnaby's mother is attracted to a sound from outside, and thinking of the raven, asks, "What was that?" "What was that? Him tapping at the door?" "No," replies Widow Rudge. "There's someone knocking softly at the shutter," Poe expanded. "No," replies Widow Rudge. "'Tis someone knocking softly at the shutter." Poe expanded the use of the keyword tapping, changed knocking to rapping, and intensified the prophetic possibilities of the bird. While I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. this and nothing more. Grip died prematurely, and Dickens was so saddened by the loss of his companion that he had the bird stuffed. Grip remained in the family until the writer's death in 1870, after which items from his estate were auctioned off, and was purchased by Colonel Richard Gimble, a collector of Poe paraphernalia. Gimble later gave Grip to the Free Library of Philadelphia, where, to this day, nearly 150 years since Dickens' death, the old bird remains on display, perhaps still bestowing some portion of its original gift of stirring the imaginations of those who see it. So, chapter 2 is titled Bird Brains Nevermore. But, so basically a play on the poem of Edgar Allan Poe. But I won't be reading that today because we're at 31 minutes. So, thank you for joining me. And I guess it's editing time for me. So, this will be